Ukraine, a country of nearly 50 million people, is sandwiched between Europe and Russia, geographically and politically. In 2014, peaceful protests turned violent and unseated a president. Russian-backed forces seized control of the Crimean Peninsula and annexed it. Amid the chaos, Ukraine elected a new leader.
Stopping the war and bringing the peace to the whole Ukraine.
He came to power as a vicious war was being fought on Ukrainian soil, a war that is still going on. While the guns may have fallen silent for now, Ukraine's leader still faces a daunting number of challenges. He's come here to Istanbul's Çırağan Palace to try to strengthen Ukraine's friendship with Turkey. And he's agreed to speak exclusively to the Newsmakers. Today's newsmaker is Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, the man whose country is still fighting what many call Europe's forgotten war. The decisions he makes and the alliances he forms could help bring about stability to a volatile region. And his countrymen are waiting to see just how he deals with a tense standoff in eastern Ukraine.
The conflict in Ukraine is entrenched. Pro-Russian separatists still control much of the east in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. The guns have now largely fallen silent, but efforts to find a lasting peace have been elusive.
This is not surprising, as Russia still supplies troops, heavy weapons and ammunition to Donbass over the border.
Russia denies sending weapons and troops, but says what it calls Russian volunteers are helping the rebels. The conflict in the east began 2 years ago, after Ukraine's pro-Western revolution. Demonstrators called for the then pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, to step down. And after they were met with force, the protests turned violent. More than 100 people died in weeks of street battles, but eventually Mr. Yanukovych fled to Russia.
I was forced to leave Ukraine under a direct threat to mine and my family's lives.
Russia responded by seizing and annexing the Crimean Peninsula and backed an insurgency in Ukraine's east, a conflict still in deadlock. A main crossing route in eastern Ukraine in contested territory. The village of Zaitsevo is surrounded by landmines, one of the main danger zones in this now largely frozen conflict. And for residents, it's a daily struggle to live a normal life. On the Ukrainian-controlled side of the checkpoint, soldiers loyal to Kiev defend their positions. This area has been ravaged by intense fighting, despite a ceasefire supposedly being in place with pro-Russian separatists for over a year.
Zaitsevo is a crucial checkpoint. If it was captured, rebels could surround this part of the front line.
Ukraine faces many other challenges. The government says it's brought in significant reforms, but the IMF has said it's not enough and that Ukraine's multi-billion-dollar bailout is at risk. There are also major concerns about corruption, including at the highest levels of government. The Ukrainian Prime Minister has faced calls to resign, and frustrated over the pace of reforms, the Economy Minister, known as a key reformer, recently stepped down. 2 years after Ukraine's pro-Western revolution, the ideals for which so many gave up their lives are still unfulfilled, and it's not clear whether Ukraine will ever reunite with its East. Duncan Crawford, The Newsmakers.
Well, that summed up the challenges facing Ukraine. Now let's talk to the man tasked with tackling all those various challenges. Today's newsmaker, the President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to have you on the Newsmakers. Welcome to Istanbul.
Thank you very much indeed.
How important is a strong relationship with Turkey to you?
Yesterday when we speak with President Erdogan, we understand that Ukrainian-Turkish relation was never on such a high level as now. We are not simply a partner, not simply a strategic partner. We have a full trust between Ukraine and Turkey, between Ukrainian president and Turkish president, between Ukrainian government and Turkish government. And this is create a unique opportunity for the increasing the cooperation in an absolutely different sphere, starting from the security and defense and finishing with the economic, cultural, humanitarian, and social, financial, banking, different others. And I think this 1.5 day, 36 hours, was one of the busiest time for me during the last time because of the number of the meeting. It was organized meeting with the president, meeting with the prime minister, Ahmed Davutoglu, meeting with the speaker of the parliament and members of the parliament, meeting with the big delegation of the Turkish business who want to come to Ukraine and feel comfortable in Ukraine. And we create a maximum our efforts to create this unique climate for Turkish investors and Turkish people.
Is your mutual tension with Russia, both have mutual issues with Russia, has that raised the stakes and further emphasized the need to stick together?
Look, we are not make a friendship against somebody. Make a friendship for creation a unique effectiveness of our cooperation. But of course, we are living in the condition of the hybrid war which provided by Russia. This is not just a combat operation on the east of my country. This is not just an illegal annexation of the Crimea and create a disastrous atmosphere for the lots of the people, especially Crimean Tatar. This is just an important element of this hybrid war, for example, is the closing of the market of Russia, rejecting for the business people, for the tourists entering to Russia, creating embargo on the some goods flow, creating the financial problem, launching the propaganda against Ukraine and Turkey, both inside Russia and outside. And we should take into account this all factor, because we as a leader of two countries responsible not only for the defense and security inside the country, but for the security regional, Black Sea security, and global security, because this is extremely difficult to provide the security when one of the country who is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, the system who can guarantee the security, when one of the country who is a guarantor under the Budapest Memorandum for Ukraine, when Ukraine voluntarily give up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, now is the object of the aggression from the Russian side. And with this situation, of course, our cooperation, the significant part of this cooperation is the security and defense sector.
Do you think the West, NATO, the United States and its allies, do you think they underestimate Russia?
On the very beginning, that's probably true. Why it's happened? Because nobody can imagine that possible to happen. Everybody imagined that it is existing the so-called red lines, which Russia never crossed. If in the year 2012, 2013, anybody called me or you or anybody else that Russia can organize the open aggression against Ukraine, they said, no, this is not possible. We have created a very effective post-war security system, and this is not allowed. We have NATO, we have a UN Security Council, and we have Budapest Memorandum that stopped. Now not anymore. If anybody said that Russia sent dozens of thousands so-called green soldiers without any labels who can attacking the main government building in Crimea, wow, that's not possible. And when it happened, I think now everybody understands that the danger is global. And Russian presence in Crimea, in the east of Ukraine, in Syria, in Transnistria, in Ossetia, in Abkhazia, in everywhere, that's create a point of instability. And my idea, if Russia launching 2 military bases in the eastern Mediterranean, on the Syrian side in Latakia, putting there the most modern fighter bomber, this is not for stabilizing the situation. This is for create absolutely another center of instability. And both Ukraine, Turkey, NATO, Europe, or United States cannot ignore this challenge.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Syria, because one of the arguments used for Syria, or being careful about any action in Syria, is you don't want to go to war with Russia, do you? So similarly, does your country have to maybe accept the annexation of Crimea, because nobody wants to go to war with Russia?
Look, when I became a president, everybody said, no, Mr. President, you don't want to war with Russia? I said, no. I hate the idea to have a war with Russia. But when Russia is an aggressor, when Russia occupied Crimea and make a military aggression on the east of my country, me as a president and as a commander-in-chief of my army will defend my land, my country. And within the 2 years, we make absolutely unique things. We create a new armed forces, because when I become a president, I don't have the armed forces. We have just several thousand, 3,000 or 5,000 soldiers. And now we have an army who stopped the Russian aggressor. Russia understands that the offensive operation is not effective anymore. And that's what doing Ukrainian soldier, Ukrainian hero, Ukrainian officer, and Ukrainian people. And I think that if you have a choice to defend your own country and your own people, you should do that, and you should be prepared on that, and you should count on yourself. Of course, you should count on your partners, no matter if it is NATO, US, Europe, but you should count on yourself, on your own people. And the level of the patriotism, the level of the readiness of the people to defend their own country is very important. And I think in this situation we are very similar, Ukraine and Turkey. We are ready to defend our country.
Like Turkey, do you still want to join Turkey and others and become a member of NATO?
Absolutely. I think that the NATO remain maybe the only effective instrument of guarantee the peace and security in the region. And this is not the matter of the tomorrow, but we significantly change in the situation. Can you imagine that 2 years ago, only 13% of the Ukrainians support the NATO integration, Ukraine integration to NATO. Today, this figure is 59%.
Do you think Russia is just going to take that line
Absolutely,
down?
absolutely.
Say,
Russian
okay,
aggression changed my country. Russian aggression changed my country. Then, before the Russian aggression, only 30% support the European integration. Today is 70%. And this is create the unique opportunity for the Ukrainians start to understand who is the friend and who is a danger.
You still want to be a part of the European Union?
No doubt. No doubt. And that's why this is who bring the millions of the people on the street during our revolution of dignity. We don't demand rising up the salary or lowering up the taxes, rising up the pension or making some economic steps for improving the social standards. People demanding the European integration.
But looking at the migration crisis, the economy, Schengen's hanging by a thread, you still want to be a part of the European Union?
At the end of the day, Europe will win. And by the way, I want to congratulate Turkey with the last results of the Turkey-European Union summit. What's going on there? Russia blackmailing Europe, Ukraine, Turkey by refugee crisis. They all the time doing that. Several years ago, Russia blackmailing Europe by gas supply through the Ukrainian transit system.
So you mean through their policy in Syria?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when several years ago Russia said, okay, Ukraine is unstable and your energy security is in the big danger. We seriously modernized during the last year, and this was the first year in 25 years when we said, Russia, we don't need your gas. And we fully guarantee the energy supply, and we don't have any problem with the European Union don't have any problem with energy. And this is just stop the opportunity for Russia to blackmailing 500 million European Union. Now, Russia launching by the absolutely irresponsible behavior in Syria, by bombing the civilian cities, not the object where the terrorists are, but where is the moderate opposition who just doing nothing wrong but voting against Assad. And they bombing civilian people for that. And creating the flow of refugees. And the mission of the Turkish representative there was, no, we do not allow Russia to blackmail the European Union. We propose an effective way to settle the refugee crisis. And everybody said, wow, that's something. This is the only opportunity to tackle this danger, this problem. And with that situation, I think we should find out an effective coordination action mechanism between Turkey, between Ukraine, between European Union, between our partners in the world, including transatlantic partners, Canada, US, and anybody, to say, okay, we do not accept this way of behavior from the Russian side. We do not allow anybody to blackmail the whole civilized world.
You say transatlantic powers, Canada, the US. Let me mention the US. Vice President Joe Biden recently almost lectured you and your government. It's one way of interpretation.
Sorry.
He said, end your squabbling, fight corruption.
I never interrupted the journalist, but I cannot accept that was a lecture. I was present.
He was saying, fight corruption, end your squabbling. Was that unfair or
Look, if
did it have a kernel of truth?
I'm shoulder to shoulder with my American partners in our fight against corruption. That's a big danger for the Ukrainian democracy. This is like a cancer. And if we, by effective coordination of our action, not stop the corruption, that would be problem for Ukraine, not problem for the United States. That's why we created the Special Anti-Corruption Bureau with a superpower, with a complete independence, both from government, from president, from parliament, from anybody. We have a unique opportunity to fight against corruption. We have a special anti-corruption prosecutor. We have create the special judicial reform. And the first results for fighting against corruption is an arrest lots of the chief of the governmental institution, local governments, prosecutors, policemen. We create absolutely new police with the full assistance of the United States. Beforehand, the old militia was a symbol of the corruption with a level of trust of the people 7%. Today we have a new police with a 0% of the corruption with a level of trust 80%. This is what we do in a cooperation with the United States. If you think that this is the position of the not friendly to our country, I'm completely don't agree with you.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is the United States looking at the situation in Ukraine. Are you not worried that perhaps they might be getting cold feet and looking at the internal squabbling, looking at you and the Prime Minister squaring off against each other, looking at the IMF questioning whether they should cut the cord?
That's a future of my country. Of course, I'm very much appreciate for the assistance and support from the European Union, from the United States, from Canada, from all our partners. And this is support not only in the internal policy. This is the support creating the global coalition, supporting Ukraine, which is the object of the aggression of Russia. The main thing is that the whole world is introducing the sanction against Russia, not as a punishment, but as a motivation for them to fulfill and to implement Minsk agreement. And without this unique opportunity and solidarity, nothing happened. Ukraine is a democratic country. And I have an absolutely fantastic personal relation with the Prime Minister. I think he is a reformer. I think he's doing a great job. And the problem is not with the President. The problem is in the Parliament. Parliament should have a coalition. Coalition should have a majority.
But you still want the Prime Minister to resign?
No. Three, if you allow me to answer.
Sure.
Three fraction of the coalition leave the coalition. And that's why, under our constitution, that it should be either new coalition with most probably new Prime Minister or early parliamentary election. My position as a president, because this is the only and single power of the president to declare the early parliamentary election, said never ever. But this is the responsibility of the parliament. You should find out a solution. Either restore old coalition. I happily will work with any prime minister, any prime minister. Or you should create a new coalition and propose another prime minister. I can accept any choice of the parliament. The only thing I demand is continuation and effectiveness of the reform. Changing of the country fighting against corruption, rising up the level of the effectiveness, we do not have any chance to lose this war. And this is not less important than the war on the east of my country against Russia.
Do you think your parliament's squabbling is taking their eye off the ball when the real threat is in the east of the country?
I trust to my parliament. I think that have enough potential to quickly resolve the crisis, and I waiting the very positive news in the very near future.
Was it damaging when the economy minister resigned, Mr. Abramovičius, and he had a lot to say when he resigned?
This is the sole responsibility of the minister. Minister has an opportunity to work for 1 year and to do and provide the reform. I want to remind you that this is me who proposed him in the government. He represented my political forces, and we have a very intensive dialogue throughout this 1 year. And he has my full support in this position. And if I'm happy with the level of the reform, no. And if you want to make a reform, please work. If you do not capable to make a reform, please resign. Very simple. But it shouldn't be a hostage of one person, one political party. We should effectively implement the reform. That's the most important thing. Especially this is dangerous for the country in a state of war. This is, please do not compare the country which provide the reform in the normal condition and when the country is an object of the aggression. And this is a triple the responsibility.
Sure, but again, I mean, he used the words cover up, corruption, puppets, old government.
Look, I hate the idea
Was all of that
to have
damaging?
a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
If it is blah, 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 this is a damaging.
Right.
If it is a one particular case, this case should be investigated, and the person who is charged, if it would be have enough of evidence, he should be in the prison. No matter. This is the changes which happen in Ukraine.
Sure.
There is no any umbrella for any person. If any person is dedicated against, connected with the corruption, he should be in prison. No matter who, what political forces he represented and how influential he is. Is it oligarch, political activist, or anybody else?
If you'll allow
and
me,
that's a change.
If you'll allow me to broaden this out again and go to the situation of the war again in the east of the country, what happens after Minsk? Okay, so the ceasefire is holding. What happens next?
After Minsk?
What happens? Does it just become a frozen conflict?
I can tell you that the Minsk has several stages. Stage number 1 is first ceasefire. We significantly decrease the fire, and we have a very demonstrative figures. Before, I lost 20, 30 soldiers a day. This is a disaster, and you cannot imagine what feel me as a president, as a commander-in-chief, when you're losing your soldiers, defending your land. And now, there's a lots of days when there is no casualties. That's the difference. Before, one of the main preconditions was the releasing of the hostages. We released almost 3,000 hostages, return them home. That's important. We, Ukraine, fulfill everything. Withdraw all the heavy artillery and weapons. Russia not. We settled and provide an effective cooperation with the Special Monitoring Mission, by the way, headed by the Turkish ambassador Pakan. We thanks very much for the effective fulfilling of the operation of the Special Monitoring Mission. And unfortunately, Russia do not allow to the inspector of the Special Monitoring Mission neither to inspect the places when they should storage the weapons, nor to the uncontrolled part of Ukrainian-Russian border. And the problem that not this means good or bad. The problem is that Russia do not implement the Minsk agreement. And there is, until now, I don't see any alternative to Minsk, because Minsk is very simple. Stop firing, cooperation with the Special Monitoring Mission, return control of the border, withdraw all the foreign troops from the territory of the independent sovereign Ukraine, provide the political reform and provide the election, but free and fair, with observation by international institutions, including ODIHR, OSCE, when this fact of the election would be recognized and the election would be free and fair, we should implement the constitutional reform, return the control of the border to the Ukrainian part, and integrate it or return Ukrainian sovereignty to this territory. Nothing more. Who is against? Nobody. But the most problem is that Russia trying to create a propaganda, but do not stop the fire, do not release the hostages, including the disastrous case with my pilot, officer of Ukrainian Armed Forces, Nadia Savchenko, who is illegally was captured on the Lugansk region, illegally delivered to Russia, and now is illegally under the so-called court. So the Minsk agreement should be fulfilled and should be implemented. And I think that the most important problem is create a very strong pressure on Russia to create a motivation to implement Minsk in full.
I know you're short on time, sir, so I have one final question for you. Do you believe that during your presidency, you can take back full control of the east of the country and get back Crimea?
I promise you I do my best on that. On the first stage, I believe that I return the control on the east of my country, and I hope that's possible this year, even. For the Crimea, it takes a little bit longer time, but there is no alternative. Crimea would be Ukrainian.
President Petro Poroshenko, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.